Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Design Theater, where we look at the art and illustration of games, movies, comics, and really try to figure out how the design works, why the designs work, so we can learn uh, just to improve our own understanding of storytelling, but also design. I think storytelling and design are very closely related to one another because it communicates a certain atmosphere, it communicates a certain emotion whenever you think about design. Design is really just a way of communicating the story, really, when you think about it. So today we're looking at this gentleman's work right here. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Hicham Habchi. Okay, so this guy's a illustrator, he's a concept artist. He teaches at Brainstorm, which is an online school. And through the online school, you can actually, I think you can get classes for like $150 for like a quick 6 week course. And you can actually do a course with this guy. I believe it's going on right now. I'll leave a link in the description, as usual, to all their content. But let's go ahead and let's take a look and let's see what it is that we can learn from this. What I really like about his work is the simplification of things. I mean, you would think that with something that looks as simple as these illustrations do, then you would think that it would be easier to do. But actually, I would say that it really isn't. Um, to be able to have this kind of style takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort. And I really like the way that he has a lot of triangle shapes going on. So we got triangle shapes down here. And then, of course, we have the big triangle shape, which is the sword that's in the background here. Uh, Overall, these sorts of designs, it seems like the shapes themselves are really what it is that you're trying to pay attention to and trying to see how it is that they taper to a point. You know, like when you think about the way it is that these shapes taper outward, they all taper to one side. Even these belts, these old latches that are going across his shoes, they all go to like a point almost, right? So that's kind of one of the reasons why it is that it has this kind of aesthetic. Whereas if it was if it was a realistic drawing, then you would have something that has a lot less curves in it. So the other thing is contrasting against curves versus straight lines, right? So as we'll go through these next ones, and I'll show you some examples. Well, this is a good example of just design in general. Whenever you're designing characters, a lot of the times what you want to do is you want to design them to be a part of a set of characters rather than just one character illustration that has nothing to do with anything. It's better to think about the characters in terms of them being a roster of characters. How do you define this character always on the right? How do you define him against the other characters? Clearly, you see the guy on the right. He's a tank, right? Like he's the guy who's got the muscle. And then you could say that the other two guys on the left and the two women, they also have their own role. It looks like the guy in yellow, he has some sort of electrical force around his arm, around his hand. And then we have the other guy in blue. He has like a fireball in his hand. So they're contrasted against one another in terms of elements. And actually, when you look at these two guys, the guy in the yellow orange shirt and shoes, he has the blue electrical effect around his hand, right? You see this blue electrical effect around his hand. And likewise, we see the exact opposite over here. We see a contrast, right? We have this blue in the character, in his pants, in his shirt, and in the bandana. But then we have this orange, red, well, the red gloves, but then also the orange fire, as well as the yellow of the beard, right? So the colors are pretty simple. He's able to get a lot done with these colors because, as you can see, they're mostly, you have a blue that is slightly desaturated, and then you have that coupled with what looks like a orange skin tone, yellow hair, right? Same thing with this lady, right? Like, she has her high contrasting point, which is the hair, and that really draws our attention to her face. But she has that same color scheme of orange and blue. And really, when we pull back, we can see that there is this contrast between warm and cool colors, right? So you have a lot of different variation in it that you can get with playing around with different colors and contrasting them. You have the warm body here, but then you have like these cooled down greens, cooled down blues in the pants, in the arms, in the belt, and that really provides a sense of contrast between the two. So let's go ahead and go through some of these others. Same thing. I mean, the guy's got just like really great design. Really enjoy his illustrations and just how simplified everything is. This is kind of an example of what I'm talking about when I say these shapes, right? You have these shapes here. Go right here. Let me just sketch this out real quick. The style that these guys work in, this super simplified style, the shapes have to have a dynamic, interesting appeal to them, and they really need to be pointing somewhere, right? It's almost like a funnel. It's like you're trying to get somebody's eye to go towards a certain point. You're trying to push their eye through the shape to this other point. So you could say that with the more narrow the part of the shape gets, that's pointing you, it's pushing your eye upwards to the next shape, which in this situation would be this shoulder plate right here, right? And this shoulder plate is, in a sense, is basically pushing us towards the head, right? Now you could make an argument and say, well, what about the hand? The hand is clearly getting smaller as it gets to the wrist, and it leads us away from the face. But I would say that this still applies, because even though, like, for example, with the legs, they're all tapering to a point, all the shapes are tapering to this point of the leg, it helps it feel organized. Even though it may not be pointing towards the face, it helps the whole thing feel organized. It doesn't feel like a disorganized drawing. And that's what a lot of good design is it's really about organizing the information it is that you're trying to communicate about the character, right? So let's look at those shapes. So like when you look at these shapes, even though I only sketched over them a little bit, you can see the design in them. Alright, so I'm getting close to being done with this episode. Let me go ahead and let's just go through some of these. Again, great design. There's a lot of symmetry in this character's overall armor design. Yeah, I love stuff like this. I mean, it feels very modern, right? And he just does so much with these shapes that he designs. And really it comes down to how can you practice this? How can you use this in what it is that you're doing? I would say looking at reference and seeing the reference and then trying to simplify it, right? Like these shapes for the pants are very simplified versions of what of what the pant legs do, right? Like you could see a photo of something like this, and they might look like there's more variation here, you know, and maybe it's not as so symmetrically attached to the leg. So that's kind of a clue. That's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. It's more about trying to make the shapes simple, organized. You know, you've got like these triangular shapes for the elbow. Again, we have that asymmetrical design with the belt going over his chest, right? And the two gloves are different. Let's go ahead and go through some of the rest of these. Yep, just incredibly good work. This looks like these are some sketches. These are some ideations. You know, he's experimenting, he's playing around, trying to figure out what his next vision's going to be. Here's a Batman piece. I really like this design. I mean, I could imagine this guy could do an awesome Batman comic. Yeah, one of the other things I like is that he uses, this is a good example of how he creates a sense of depth in the character. So he's got these black shadow shapes, and they're basically like little triangular shapes, and they're all over the darkest parts of the drawing, right? He's got them all over the place, and it's basically just like line weights added onto the lines. You know, you look at the lines themselves, and they're all the same width. All these lines, for the most part, they're the same width. There's some variation in the width here, but what gives the drawing a sense of um, weight is these black shapes that he adds in here, these little cast shadow shapes underneath things, right? And he saves the biggest one for right next to the face. So that tells you where our contrasting point is, right? Because all throughout the rest of the drawing, you see all these black shapes peppered all over the drawing, but none of them are nearly as big as in the face. And that's some more ideation. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call it here, and tomorrow I'll be up with another one, and I hope you guys like this. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. If there's other artists you'd like for me to look at, feel free to drop a comment in the link in the description below. Thank you.